In lesson 13, we're going to use reasonableness to verify the answers to addition and subtraction problems to see if they're actually reasonable. Question 1 says, are the following expressions greater or less than 1? Circle the correct answer. And what I told you to do on your homework was actually give a reason why, not just circle. Now, for A, we come over here, and it shows that 1/2, we're going to basically compare both fractions to 1/2. In A, we have 1/2, which is equal to 1/2, and we have 4/9, which is less than 1/2. So if I have a fraction that's half, and I'm adding less than a half, then it's going to be less than 1. And the reasoning for this is because 4/9 is less than 1/2. On 2, they have it saying greater than 1. Well, let's look at it and see if we can justify it. 5/8 would be greater than 1/2. 3/5 would be greater than 1/2 because half of 3/5 and halves would have to be 2 1/2 5. So both fractions are greater than 1/2. On the next one, on C, it says 1 1/5 minus 1/3. Well, I can see that 1/3 is larger than 1/5. So I cannot subtract 1/3 from 1/5, so I'd have to regroup from my whole, which means that's going to be less than 1. Because I would have to take the 1/5 plus part of the whole in order to subtract 1/3. So the answer would be less than 1. And the reasoning is because 1/3 is greater than 1/5, requiring regrouping from 1. On D, 4 3/5 minus 3 3/4. And they're saying this is less than 1. Okay, so if I looked at this and I took 3 minus 4 minus 3, we're going to have 1 whole. And 3/4 is larger than 3/5, so I'd have to regroup from this one. So that means it would be less than 1. And that's because 3/4 is greater.
This is a drill. This is a code red lockdown drill.
3/5.
Code red lockdown drill.
On the number 2, it's asking us, are the following expressions greater than or less than 1/2? So this time I'm going to use 1/4 as my benchmark. Now I can see on A I have 1/4. 1/5 is less than 1/4, so there's no way the sum can be greater than 1/2. So it's going to be less than 1/2 because 1/5 is less than 1/4. On B, we can see that 6/7 is almost 1 whole. 1/6 is less than 1/4, so I know it's going to be, when I subtract it, it's going to be greater than half. And that's because 6/7 is almost 1 whole, and 1/6 is less than 1/4. On C, we can see that 5/6, I know that if I took 1 minus 5/6, I end up 1/6 and 1/7. Now, I know 1/6 is less than 1/4, and I'm going to add another one that's less than 1/4, so there's no way it's going to be greater than 1/2, so it's going to be less than 1/2. That's because both fractions are less than 1/4. The final one, I know 1/8 is less than 1/4. 4/7 is a little more than 1/2. Okay, so this one here could be pretty close, but I know if I turn this into eighths, well, I can't turn that into eighths. Okay, but 4/7 is just a little bit greater than 1/2. So if I subtract 1/8 from it, it should be less than 1/2. But on this one so close, why don't we verify it, okay? We use a smiley face method. We know that we're going to end up with 56. And we have 4 times 8, which is going to give us 32. And we're going to add 7, which now gives us 39/46. Well, now we know this is divisible by 3. And I know that because if I add my digits, 9 and 3 is 12, which is a multiple of 3, and 4 and 6 is 10. Also, it's not a multiple of 3. But I can already tell it's more than 1/2 because 24/46 would be 1/2. 39/46 is a whole, so it's going to be greater than 1/2. So our initial assessment was not correct. Number 3, use greater than, less than, or equal to the following statements true. Now here they're saying this is true. I mean, not true. They're saying that it's less than. Now, to me,
Teachers and students, the code red drill is now over. The code red drill lockdown is now over.
Okay, so now I'm going to take 5 and 2 together, which gives us 7. And I have 4/5, which is almost a whole, and 2/3. I'd have to add some of the 2/3 to the 4/5 though to get 8. And my remaining is not going to be greater than 3/4. So that's why this one here becomes less than. On our second one here, if I take 3 minus 2, that gives me 1. And here I'm taking 4/7 minus 3/5. Over here it's 4/7 plus 3. So that means this one here is going to be less than, because we are subtracting 4/7 minus 3/5. And on this one right here and this one here, we are adding 4/7 plus 3/5. On C, once again, I'm going to add these two, and I end up with 5. Now I've got 1/2 and 9ths. I'm going to go ahead and convert this 4/9 into 18ths so I can compare it. And I multiply that by 2, that's going to be 8 18ths. And I'm going to add a 1/2, okay? And the 1/2 would end up being, multiplying that by 9 is going to be 18 9/18ths. And that's going to give us 17 18ths. So this one here is actually greater than. On this one we had to do a lot more working out than we had to on the others. On D, once again we're going to combine these two, subtract them so we can compare it to the 3, and we're going to have 3. Now we got, what's left is 3/8 minus 3/5, and over here we have 3 and 3/8 plus 3/5. So the one we're adding is going to be greater, so it's less than. Number 4, is it true that 5 2/3 minus 3 3/4 equals 1 plus 2/3 plus 3/4? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and combine these two. So now I've got 2 plus 2/3 minus 3/4. Okay, well, we can already see that this is not going to be true. Okay, because it cannot be true. If you see here, we have one whole difference, this, and we're subtracting 3/5 from this side, and we're adding 3/4 on this side. So it is not true. Okay, a tree limb hangs 5 1/4 feet from a telephone wire. The city trims back the branch before it grows within 2 1/2 feet of the wire. Will the city allow the tree to grow 2 3/4 more? So we're going to do a quick little drawing here just to be able to see it. We're going to say that this is our tree. I got a highlighter. Let me change it over to pen. Why is it coming up like that? Option, pen. There we go. So we have a tree here. And here we have our wire. They're saying that currently the distance is 5 1/2 feet. 5 1/4 feet, I'm sorry. And it says they trim it if it gets within 2 1/2 feet. They want to know if it's going to allow it to grow 2 3/4 feet. So the question here goes, is 2 3/4 plus 2 1/2, is this greater than, wrong way, is this greater than 5 1/4 feet? Well, we can see when we add these two up, that'd be 4 3/4 and 1/2 is going to be 1 1/4, which equals 5 1/4. So it's going to be equal to 5 1/4. So yes, they will allow it